Hey everybody, it's Jason from Outdoor Adventures, and thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about shelter systems and more specifically how to choose a shelter system, what you need to know before buying. Now behind me we have a tent and we have a hammock. We're going to get into both of these just a little bit. We're going to start off with the tent, and before we even go any further, there are three different types of tents out there. We have freestanding, like the one behind me. We have semi-freestanding, and we also have non-freestanding. Now, what do all those terms mean? The first type, freestanding, the one that's directly behind me. Basically, it has a set of poles. The tent connects to those poles, and then you stake it down so it doesn't fly away on you at night. If I unstake the tent, I'm able to pick this up and move it wherever I want without having to redo the whole setup of the tent. It's a very easy setup, but the weight is a little high. A semi-freestanding tent usually has less structural poles, and you have to, it's called guy out some of the corners of the tent. And that just means taking a piece of string and going down to a stake to kind of widen the tent out, kind of give it that structure. That's a great option too. They're usually a little more complicated to set up, but they usually pack down smaller, and they usually weigh a bit less than the typical freestanding tents. Non-freestanding tents typically utilize these things called trekking poles. Hikers usually use these as they're walking around to give you more ankle support, to help on uphills, to help on downhills, and just all around to make you more stable when you're hiking. Now, a non-freestanding tent usually substitutes the trekking poles for the structural poles that a freestanding tent comes with. Typically, you turn them upside down, and there is a little notch in the tent where the tip of the trekking pole slides into, typically like a grommet. That part will go over top of the pole, and then that tent will get guyed out and staked down to the ground. Now, that saves a lot of weight, a lot of pack space, and they are usually the #1 choice of ultralight backpackers, people that are trying to be weight conscious when they go out there. If I was to get another tent right now, I would probably get a non-freestanding tent, knowing what I know now. An example of a non-freestanding tent would be the tarp tent notch. If you've seen any of my videos, that's what Gary uses, and he just carries his trekking poles and sets it up with his poles. Works nearly every time. The only time it wouldn't work, I'd say, would be when you're on a mountain and there's no trees, there's no rocks to use as anchor points, and you're on a very, very hard surface that won't allow you to put your stakes into the ground. Like a rock face would be this. So you would obviously have to pick up and move. Now, I could camp in that same location I just described with a freestanding tent. So now that you kind of have a better idea of that, let's move on to the hammock. Now, right off the bat, hammock camping is not for everybody. Now, I'm going to be honest too, it is a bit of a learning curve when you first get started. And the reason for that is there's just more parts, okay? You have your bug net, you have the suspension, you have the hammock, you have your tarp. If you really like it and you want to get more into it, you have your underquilt and you have your top quilt. And, you know, some of those things, you know, getting the right angle, figuring out how to lay, getting in your sweet spot, it can be a little daunting, and that's why I don't recommend starting with a hammock unless you have a friend that you know or someone that you can borrow a hammock from. A lot of people, when they first start hammock camping, and I myself did this as well, they go with a brand called Eno. It's a very well respected brand. A lot of people have these things. This is a double nest hammock in my hand right here, and these are modular, which means they don't come with a suspension, they don't come with a tarp, and they don't come with a bug net. So if you total all the items that you would need up, eventually you're going to equal a number that's usually higher than something with an all built-in system minus a tarp. The hammock behind me is a War Bonnet Blackbird. As you notice, there is bug netting, mosquito netting on top of the hammock, and then you have the hammock which you can get in via this zipper. Okay, there's plenty of good brands out there. Just to name a few, we have Hennessy, we have War Bonnet, Dutchware gear, dream hammocks. There's just a ton of people out there, and I recommend looking into those vendors a little bit. I can't tell you what to buy, but I can recommend that a person that's just getting into this, I very highly recommend the Hennessy Expedition Asym. I think it's about $150, and you get every single thing that you're going to need to get you started. That includes a tarp, a suspension, a integrated bug net, and the hammock itself. So, I mean, it's a little heavy, it's a little bulky, but it is very, very comfortable. It's what I started with, and then you can upgrade as needed like I did. Now, there's a couple different types of hammocks as well, just like tents. You have the gathered end hammock, and what that means is they get a piece of fabric and they kind of gather the end of the hammock and wrap a line around it, really. You also have something called a bridge hammock. It's just a pole system that goes in the hammock that kind of stretches out the head and foot end. Now, I typically don't recommend these especially for a beginner just getting into this, because it's a bit bulky, it's a bit heavier than just having the gathered end hammock, and in all honesty, gathered end hammocks, in my opinion, are perfectly fine, and they're very comfortable. I think the bridge hammocks are they're probably a little bit more comfortable. I've never laid in one myself, but just the design, the U shape, you know, you're gonna lay flat either way. In one of these asymmetrical hammocks, basically you lay on a diagonal, so your feet go toward the right or wherever, and then your head kind of stays toward the left. So so here's the hammock, and you're laying on a diagonal, which makes the hammock feel flat. If you just got in the hammock as it is, you'd kind of be bowed like a banana. And for the people that are trying to stick with the tarp, maybe they're not ready to make the switch, or they just like tents better, you know. Some of the cheaper manufacturers that are still really good brands, Eureka, Nemo, Kelty, all good brands. If you want to go a little bit upscale, Big Agnes is a great manufacturer. The Copper Spur, the Fly Creek, all good models by Big Agnes. Just know that when they say a one-person tent or a two-person tent, it literally means a two-person tent, and that's all you'll have room for, okay? I know it seems kind of silly, but you will not have gear storage. It'll be pushing it if you like to sleep, you know, with your arms out like I do. I mean, two-person means two-person, and that's pushing it too. So just remember that. You know, don't go out to the store and waste your money on a giant Coleman 6-person tent that you think you're going to have a party at a campsite. Especially if you're going car camping, that's perfectly all right. But for any kind of backpacking trip, you're not going to want to carry that. Okay, I think this tent weighs somewhere around 4 pounds. Correct me if I'm wrong. And my hammock weighs, I think, 34 ounces, 24 ounces, something around there. And you know, it's a good system. Now, a couple things to consider between the tent and the hammock. The hammock, in my opinion, has some advantages over the tent. In my case, I feel it's more comfortable. I have a lot of back issues, neck issues, which seem to not exist whenever I'm camping out in my hammock. They are very persistent issues, however, when I am camping out over several days in a tent. I'm not sure why that is. Personally, I have a better night's sleep in a hammock, but like I said at the beginning, this is all personal preference. I can't tell you what to buy. All I can do is give advice. Something to consider though, if you're in an area without a lot of trees, and you know, for instance, if you hike the desert a lot, if you're up in the mountains a lot, and there aren't that many trees around, you may want to just consider just staying with the tent and kind of being done with it. And on the flip side, if you're in an area where the ground is barely ever even, again, it could be a mountain or whatever, and you know, you just want to be able to find a couple trees and, you know, set up shop, then maybe the hammock is, you know, a good option for you. You just kind of have to, you know, go hiking for a bit. That's why I'm kind of recommending people get the tent first. See where you're going to go, see where you're going to end up, see what kind of places are your favorite places to visit, and then you can kind of make your decision on, you know, what shelter you need after that. Another thing we need to talk about as far as the hammock setup go is to show you guys what a typical tarp looks like on a hammock and how to stay dry. Now, most tents do come with rain protection, this being called a rain fly, and with that, it's just a real light piece of, this is sil nylon, it's a very, very light material, it's waterproof. This little area right here, it's called a vestibule. So what you're able to do with this is, obviously you're able to just throw your boots, your backpack, or your shoes out here, and everything will stay dry if it does decide to rain during the night, during the day, whatever. And most tent manufacturers give you 1 to 2 vestibules on their tents. Now this comes all together, standard. You won't have to go out and buy the tent and then buy the rain fly. Usually they're stocked together. Another thing you may want to consider is they make something called a footprint, a tent footprint. And all that is, it's just another piece of material that'll go underneath of your tent to kind of separate the tent from the ground. And what this does, for one thing, it makes the tent more durable, obviously, because you're adding another layer of protection between the tent and the ground. But also, if it does rain or the ground is a mess and it's muddy or something, all the mud stays on the footprint, and you can kind of pack that away separately and kind of keep your tent clean. So you can make your own out of window insulation. It's called polycro. You can just cut out a strip. It'll last for a couple trips. Then you just throw it away and make another one. It's really not hard. It's very, very cheap. Or you can get home wrap. It's Tyvek, really. And you want to cut out a little section of there, and that'll save you 20 or 30 bucks, depending on how much the footprint is. When you do cut your footprints out, if you are making them yourself to save money, make sure you cut out for your tent, but go in like 1 to 2 inches so it's actually underneath of your tent. The water won't pull and then eventually get into your tent anyway. It'll run down the rain fly first, and there'll be no way for water to get underneath in between your footprint and your tent. Another thing that more than likely you're going to have to purchase separately, unless you take the Hennessy deal I told you about, is a tarp for your hammock. These can be anywhere from, I've seen them as low as $20, or they can be upwards of $350, just depending on what material that you really want. In my opinion, you should get a sil nylon. It seems to be the best waterproofness, durability, and price within that category. You can look at, just a standard blue tarp they sell at Walmart for 20 bucks to get you by for now, and hook it up with some ropes. I don't want to go too in depth on tarps. Maybe we'll talk about it in a later video series. But just know that these 2 options will keep you dry. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope just this information at least helped you get started on some research. I could go in depth and talk for days about this stuff, but it's really a personal choice. Take a look at some of the brands that I mentioned and see what works for you, see what you like. Go up to your outdoor store and lay in it, set it up, practice setting it up, put it in your backpack, see how it is, see how you like it. So guys, with that, I'm Jason. Thanks for joining me, and I hope this helps somebody. Alright guys, so hey everybody, welcome to, what kind of shelter do you want? Are you a tent kind of guy or girl? Do you want to sleep in a tent? Behind me, for example, is, there's three different types of tents. There's now a non-freestanding tent usually utilizes